They thought I was done. At a dinner in my own living room, my husband's new girlfriend, bold as brass, looked at me and mocked me in front of everyone. They laughed. My husband, too. My cheeks burned, but I said nothing. They mistook my silence for weakness. What they didn't know was that I was already planning. And when I finally struck, I wouldn't just take back my dignity. I'd take the very house they laughed in. The night it happened is etched in my memory like a scar you can't stop tracing. The table was set, candles flickering, wine glasses half full. It should have been a quiet evening, a civil gathering even if the circumstances were far from normal. My husband had insisted on hosting his friends, though at that point he was more my estranged husband than anything else. Our divorce papers weren't signed yet, but the vows we once made were already dust, and there she was, his girlfriend, the woman who had waltzed into my life like she owned the place, who filled the silence between us with her shrill laugh and the scent of expensive perfume. She sat in my chair at the dining table, legs crossed, looking around the room as though inspecting her new kingdom. At first, I tried to hold myself together. I poured wine, I smiled at his friends, people who had once been mine too, and I reminded myself that dignity mattered, that losing my temper wouldn't fix a thing. But then she looked up at the curtains, the very ones I had chosen years ago on a rainy Saturday afternoon when money was tight and every purchase had to be weighed against the bills. I had been proud of those curtains, not because they were luxurious, but because they represented us, our home, the family we had tried to build. She smirked, swirling her wine. "Oh, aren't these quaint? Still holding on to Grandma Chic, huh?" The room erupted in laughter. Not a kind laugh, not a chuckle you could brush off, but sharp and cutting. My husband chuckled too, though nervously, as if caught between loyalty and indulgence. But he didn't stop her. He didn't defend me. I felt heat rise to my face, spreading to my ears, down my neck. My fork clattered against the plate. Every insecurity I'd tucked away, the sleepless nights, the sagging skin, the years of putting him first while I faded, into the background, flared in that moment. I excused myself, smiling politely, as though I hadn't just been stabbed in the chest with words. Upstairs, I shut the bathroom door and gripped the sink with both hands. My reflection stared back, eyes glistening, jaw trembling. "You are not broken," I whispered to myself. "You are not done." I stayed up late that night after they all left, replaying the laughter again and again, letting the anger burn slow and steady. And somewhere between midnight and dawn, as the house finally grew quiet, a thought sparked inside me. This is still my house. She mocked me in my house. That's when the plan began to take shape. When people ask me when my marriage began to crumble, I can never give them one neat answer. It wasn't like a storm tearing through overnight. It was more like a slow leak in the roof, drip after drip, until one day the ceiling caves in. In the beginning, he was charming. We built this house together brick by brick, or at least that's how I like to think of it. We scraped pennies to buy our first couch, painted the walls ourselves, argued over what shade of blue looked best in the bedroom. It was ours. Ours in a way that felt unshakable. But life has a cruel way of testing what you think is unbreakable. He started working longer hours. At first, I believed his excuses, late meetings, unexpected deadlines, business trips that seemed to come one after the other. I told myself he was working hard for us, for our future. But I began to notice the small things, the way his eyes darted when I asked simple questions, the way his phone seemed permanently glued to his hand, buzzing with messages he never let me see. Then came the silences, whole evenings where we barely exchanged more than a sentence. He sat in his chair, scrolling or watching television, and I sat across the room, knitting or reading, trying to pretend the distance wasn't widening. Some nights I would lie awake listening to him breathe beside me, wondering how someone could feel so far away even when they were just inches apart. By the time she came into the picture, part of me wasn't even surprised. The late nights had turned into overnight absences, the hushed phone calls into outright avoidance. I knew. Every instinct told me. Still, when he finally confessed, if you can call it that, I felt as though the floor had dropped out beneath me. He didn't even say it with guilt. He said it with a kind of relief, as though unburdening himself of a secret he had grown tired of keeping. "I've met someone," he said, like he was talking about buying a new car. And then, with almost insulting casualness, he added, "She makes me feel alive again." Alive again. The words stung. Was I death then? Was I the weight pulling him down, the shadow sucking away his vitality? Years of cooking, cleaning, supporting him through layoffs and promotions, through illness and health, had all of that turned me into a ghost in his eyes? I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I sat there quietly, letting his words wash over me, feeling each one carve a deeper groove into my heart. And when he asked if I understood, I nodded. But deep down, a part of me whispered, one day, you'll regret this. The divorce process began soon after. His lawyer called, polite but brisk, already prepared with proposals. He assumed I'd settle quickly, that I'd sign away my share just to be done. Perhaps he thought I was too tired to fight, too beaten down by betrayal to stand tall. What he didn't realize was that betrayal doesn't always break a woman. Sometimes it sharpens her. Every document I signed, I read twice. Every offer they made, I countered with precision. I wasn't going to let him and his new girlfriend waltz into the life I had helped build and take it as their own. Especially not the house. That house wasn't just wood and drywall. It was the years of my life. The place where I laughed, cried, raised memories. The one thing they could never take lightly. And so, as the weeks rolled on, while he paraded her around at dinners and parties, I quietly steeled myself. He thought the marriage had ended neatly when he walked out. But for me, the unraveling was only the beginning. Because once you've been humiliated in your own home, once you've been mocked by the woman he replaced you with, you don't just let go. You fight. And I was ready to fight harder than he ever imagined. When people talk about revenge, they often picture shouting matches, slammed doors, maybe a dramatic scene with tears and broken dishes. But mine was quieter, slower, methodical. It wasn't about chaos. It was about control. I started with research. Nights when sleep wouldn't come, I sat at my desk under the dim glow of the lamp, sifting through old files, bank statements, mortgage papers. Every corner of that house had my fingerprints on it. Every repair, every improvement, every bill paid. I wasn't just living there, I had invested in it, carried it through hard times when he barely noticed. And the law, I discovered, had a way of honoring that. I found a lawyer who didn't flinch at the mess of it all, a sharp woman with kind eyes who listened without interrupting as I poured out the years of betrayal and the humiliation of that dinner night. When I finally paused, expecting pity, she leaned forward and said firmly, "You have more power here than you think?" Those words lit something inside me. We dug into the details. The house had been purchased in both our names, but over the years it was my inheritance that had paid for the new roof, my salary that covered the second mortgage when his business failed, my careful budgeting that kept the lights on during his long stretches of finding himself. My lawyer showed me how the paper trail told a story, one of sacrifice and contribution that gave me leverage. Meanwhile, I kept my composure in front of him. Every meeting, every phone call, I played the part of the calm, resigned ex-wife. He mistook my silence for surrender. His girlfriend, with her smug glances and whispered comments when she thought I couldn't hear, treated me as though I were already gone, just a footnote in their shiny new life. But behind closed doors, I was building my case brick by brick, like a fortress. I documented everything. The emails he sent, casually admitting to shifting funds from our joint account for his nights out, the receipts I had kept over the years, each one a testament to the fact that I wasn't just a bystander in our marriage. I was the one holding it together. There were moments when doubt crept in. I would sit alone in the quiet house, imagining what it would feel like to lose it. To pack up the memories, box by box, while they moved in and laughed in the living room that still held echoes of my children's laughter. The thought tightened around my chest like a vice. But then I'd remember that night, her laughter, his smirk, the sting of being mocked in my own dining room, and that memory steeled me. The legal process was slow, agonizingly so. Papers filed, hearings scheduled, delays that stretched weeks into months. He grew impatient, calling me names over the phone, telling mutual friends that I was dragging things out just to spite him. His girlfriend posted pictures online of them house hunting, as though it were a done deal. I said nothing. Not to him, not to anyone, because revenge, real revenge, thrives in silence. When the day finally came for us to sit across from each other in the mediation room, I dressed with care. Not glamorous, not flashy, but steady. I wanted to look like exactly what I was, a woman who knew her worth. He sauntered in, his girlfriend at his side, her perfume entering the room before she did. She smirked at me, that same smirk she wore the night she mocked my curtains. And then the lawyers began. My lawyer laid it all out, the receipts, the payments, the inheritance money I had poured into the home. The picture she painted wasn't just financial, it was moral. It showed years of quiet labor, the invisible backbone of a marriage, turned tangible on paper. By the time she finished, I caught a flicker in his eyes. Doubt, maybe even fear. His girlfriend's smirk faltered, her eyes darting toward him, silently asking why this wasn't going the way she'd expected. That was the first time I allowed myself to smile. The groundwork was set. The house wasn't slipping through my fingers. It was slipping through theirs. The day the ruling came down, I was sitting alone in the kitchen, sipping tea from my favorite chipped mug. It wasn't dramatic. The judge's words weren't shouted. They weren't even sharp. They were calm, deliberate, final. And just like that, the house was mine. All of it, the mortgage, the deed, every nail in the beams and every flower blooming in the yard, mine. I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of it settle in. For months, I'd been carrying the fear that I would lose everything, that I'd be shoved aside while they danced through the home I had built. Now that fear was gone. In its place was something else, quiet satisfaction. Of course, he didn't take it well. When we stepped out of the courthouse, he turned on me, his voice tight with anger. "You think this makes you better than me? You think keeping the house changes what we had?" His girlfriend stood just behind him, arms crossed, her face pale and tight. Gone was the smirk she used to wear like armor. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "No," I said softly. "It doesn't change what we had. It just means you don't get to mock me in it anymore." For a moment, silence hung between us, thick and heavy. And then he stormed off, pulling her with him, leaving me standing there in the crisp autumn air with nothing but my victory. But here's the thing about revenge. It's never just about winning. It's about how you win. I could have rubbed it in. I could have flaunted the ruling to our friends, turned every gathering into a reminder that I had triumphed. But I didn't. My revenge wasn't loud. It was subtle. When they came to collect his belongings, I didn't slam the door in their faces. I let them in, offered them water, even smiled. They walked through the house quietly, picking up his clothes, his tools, his keepsakes. She kept glancing around as if she expected me to throw her out at any moment, but I didn't. Instead, I followed them room to room, not with anger, but with calmness. Watching her eyes linger on the walls I had painted, the garden I had nurtured, the kitchen where I had cooked for decades. She saw it now, the depth of what she had mocked. This wasn't just a house, it was my life. My heart poured into every corner, and it would never be hers. That was my revenge. She could wear his ring, she could sit beside him at parties, she could mock me all she wanted in public. But at the end of the day, when they laid their heads down at night, it would never be in this house. And that knowledge weighed heavier on them than any insult I could have thrown. Weeks later, I heard whispers. His business had taken a downturn. The girlfriend, who once bragged about their dinners and trips, had gone quiet online. Friends told me she looked uneasy, unhappy, like she had realized the glitter wasn't gold after all. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Life has a way of settling its own scores. Meanwhile, I thrived. I redecorated the living room, turning it into a place of peace instead of memory. I planted new flowers out front, their colors bold and unapologetic, every nail hammered, every brushstroke of paint was a reminder. This is mine. I chose this. I fought for this. Sometimes I'd walk through the house at night, barefoot, the quiet echoing around me. And I would smile because the walls no longer whispered of betrayal. They sang of survival. One evening, I found that same girlfriend's laughter still echoing in my head from the night she mocked me. I remember how small she tried to make me feel in front of friends, as though I were nothing but a relic of his past. But now the memory no longer hurt. It fueled me, because every time I set foot in my home, I was reminded that the best revenge wasn't shouting her down that night. It was watching her walk away empty-handed, realizing she had gained a man, but lost the foundation beneath him. The house was more than brick and wood. It was proof that strength can be quiet, that dignity can outlast mockery, and that sometimes, the sweetest revenge is simply holding on while others lose what they thought they'd taken. In the months that followed, life settled into a rhythm I hadn't known in years. For the first time in a long time, the silence in the house wasn't heavy. It wasn't the silence of loneliness or betrayal. It was peace. At first, it felt strange waking up alone. I'd walk downstairs and half expect to see him at the table, sipping coffee and scrolling through his phone. But instead, it was just me, and I realized that was enough. More than enough. I didn't need someone sitting across from me to give the morning meaning. I gave it to myself. I started making small changes. A fresh coat of paint on the kitchen cabinets. Pale blue instead of the dull beige he had insisted on years ago. I rearranged the furniture in the living room, opening up the space so light streamed in freely. Each change was like shedding old skin, peeling away the memories of his presence and replacing them with something new, something mine. Friends began to visit again. They had kept their distance during the messy separation, unsure of where loyalty should lie, afraid of saying the wrong thing. But one by one, they drifted back into my orbit. We shared meals around the same dining table where I had once been mocked, but this time, there was only laughter, real laughter, not the cruel kind that cuts deep. I began hosting book clubs, small gatherings of neighbors and old coworkers. The house, once a battlefield, became a sanctuary for connection. People filled it with warmth, not judgment. And every time someone told me, "Your home feels so cozy, so alive," I felt a quiet pride. Because it wasn't just the decor or the food, it was the energy I poured into it. Meanwhile, word trickled back about him and the girlfriend. Their picture-perfect romance was unraveling. She had wanted the shine of wealth, the stability of status, and what she found instead was debt and disappointment. Without the house to lean on, they moved into a cramped apartment across town. Friends told me she complained about the lack of space, the old appliances, the noise of neighbors through thin walls. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Revenge had already played its part. Now it was simply life, doing what it always does, revealing truth over time. But more than watching their struggles, I found joy in my own growth. I took up painting again, a hobby I had abandoned decades ago when raising kids and managing bills left me no room for myself. I set up a small studio in the sunroom, and day after day, I painted. Sometimes landscapes, sometimes portraits, sometimes just wild strokes of color that felt like freedom on canvas. Neighbors began asking to buy my work. At first I laughed, thinking they were just being kind, but then one offered real money, then another. Before long, my art was hanging in living rooms and cafes around town. A new identity bloomed. Not just a woman who had survived betrayal, but an artist, a creator, someone with her own story to tell. And that, I realized, was the greatest revenge of all. Not just taking back the house, but taking back myself. There were still nights when memories crept in. Nights when I'd lie awake and remember the sting of her laughter, the humiliation of sitting there while they mocked me. But instead of breaking me, those memories fueled me. They reminded me how far I'd come, how I had turned pain into power. One evening, as I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I thought about the word home. For so long I had tied that word to him, to us, to the life we had built together. But now I knew better. Home wasn't about who you shared it with. It was about who you became within it. I had become stronger, wiser, softer in some ways, harder in others. And as the cool breeze carried the scent of the garden I had planted, I smiled. Because in the end, the house wasn't just a symbol of revenge. It was a symbol of resilience. Proof that no one, not a husband, not a girlfriend, not anyone, could take away my foundation unless I let them. And I never would again. In the end, revenge wasn't about screaming louder or cutting deeper. It was about standing tall, about holding on to what was rightfully mine and refusing to be erased. My husband's new girlfriend thought her laughter could shrink me. She thought her words could define me. But she was wrong. I didn't just keep the house. I reclaimed my peace. I rediscovered myself. And every time I walk through these halls, I hear not the echo of their cruelty, but the strength of my own survival. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't fire or fury. It's building a life so steady, so full, that those who tried to mock you can only watch from the outside, knowing they can never step back in.